Okay, so let's start a new a new unit here. We get 6. So I created my usual folders, the JS folder and the CSS folder. I haven't used a lot of CSS in this class so far. I hope you do. And we just create the index file. So what are we're gonna validate? Any suggestions? Pizza toppings and membership forms. Go on trip. So I'm going to go ahead and create my JavaScript file. This will be just, what do we call this? I guess just validate.js. And we'll also create a CSS file. We'll make it as real as we can, right? So I'll just call this the main.css. Okay, so we'll style our form to make it look kind of nice. And this is like the usual way to do it. You want to move your CSS and your scripts out into their separate files. So in a sense, you're actually separating these concerns. We call those separation of concerns, right? So you only worry about one at one time. It's also very easy to maintain and manage. It makes your code looks nicer as well, clean, and it's easier to debug also. Okay, so you know exactly where to go to. All right, so we're going to include that script and the CSS. The link first. href is going to be inside the CSS main. Then my script. I always wonder why they put the href for the link and src for the script. Or couldn't they just use one? So let's be js.validate. Okay. So in here, we're going to have, we'll put something here in the h1 so we know that we see something on the screen. I guess we can put, membership form. Okay. I'm going to close this side. There we have it. I'm going to run this so I can have the output over here. I'm going to resize this. So it's going to stick right here. Something's wrong here. Is it my script tag? Nope. Okay. I'm not sure if it's that or not, but just a tiny one fails it. Okay, so let's build our form. Again, over here, if you press F12 and on the console, if I type in document.forms, okay, as you can see, it returns an empty array or list. There's no forms in there, a length of 0. So that forms is a part of the object model. Just like image as well, I can do like documents dot images. It also tells me if I have any images or any image tags in my form. Okay, so those two are very useful. And if a form has some information, some elements, I could do like documents dot forms. Which form is it? Or just the first form have any elements or not. I don't have any, so doesn't work. Okay, we'll come back, we'll visit this later. So let's create our form. Just form tag. You don't have to put anything on the head of the form. It's completely fine, but that's not typical, right? Usually you put a few attributes there, and one of those is the action, and this is what the form is going to. You process the form, it takes it to this action. It's a link to a page, either a thank you page or usually a processing page at the back end, or maybe another HTML page that would maybe go to like if you have like a step-by-step process, right? Page 1, page 2, page 3, and so on. And the page 1 here, instead of sending the data to the server, you can keep that inside an array, and then you propagate it to page 2 and page 3, and you have an array of data. And you reach the last page, then you submit everything to the server, right? You can do that too, right? But for now, we're just going to say just process to itself. So we'll just put you can leave it blank, or you can put a pound sign, or you can put to yeah, pound sign is okay. It just means to itself. Has a method is we use get, so we'll see the data attached appended to the URL. Okay, we have those we call those URL tokens as a key value pair. So inside the form here, then this is where you usually have your input tags, right? A lot of inputs. I mean, you're not limited to just input tags. You can put paragraph tags, div tags, whatever you need to put in there. Tables if you have to, okay? But only those data that are going to be processed are coming from the input tags. The input, text area, and select tags. Just those three. The others are just for making your form, informative and meaningful and beautiful. Basically, that's it, right? So. So what do we have on the first form? Usually, if you have a membership form, what do we have on the first thing? Name, right? So we could do like index, no, an index, input. And you give it a name or ID, and I'll show you that you can actually access either one in the form. Okay, so you can just put name here. Will be like first name. And then the second field will be like, just put last name. We don't need the middle name. Name will be last name. And then I think that's it, right? You can close it with that, I think. And we'll put a BR here just to break that form. So at the very bottom down here, we can go ahead and put that down here as the button to submit. So input type is, bless you, type will be submit. Okay, if you don't put a value, it will say submit by default. If you want to say something else, you could say value is join, right? And we usually have the reset also. So type is reset. You can say, instead of reset, you can use like start over. Okay, so let's see what that looks like. I mean, put on separate lines, okay. So your input tags are inline style, so it doesn't matter if you put separate lines or not, it's gonna wrap it into a single line anyway. Unless you style it with a block type, then it will force it to be in a new line. Okay, so my view over here, if I refresh it, I should have my form display here. Not as beautiful as I want it to be yet, but something there. So we have the form here. As you can see, if I submit, it actually submit that form for me. How do I know that? Well, if you look at the URL, you see that it has the tokens right here. First name is blank, last name is blank, right? If you see that, that means it's been submitted. So here again, start over. Well, I already submitted, so it has that thing there already. But okay, so fresh here. There's nothing there. I click submit, join. It sends it over, so it has the data here. If I put something here, I put name, Jack Black. Doesn't matter. So here is the Jack and the Black, Oak in this case. Okay, so let's style our form just a little bit, make it a little bit bigger. So go to our CSS, and we will style the input. We'll give it a, what do we do with the input? We'll make it a little bit bigger, so I guess we'll have the padding, maybe, was it like with 5, what does that do? Doesn't do much. See, what 10? Doesn't affect. Okay. But the buttons for sure. Let's do with the button. It's just a button tag. We'll put the font size. Oops. To be what? Put like I don't know, 15px. What does that look like? It's not linked.
It's not no, it's even a lot now. Or read online.
Maybe you can input my button.
Oh, I'm missing something here. Yeah, I missed that one. The relationship thing. I hope that's it. Yeah. Rar. Doesn't tell me. Okay, so I missed that. If you forgot to put that REL, that relationship attribute, I think you should be smart enough to know that, right? Come on. Just like the script. We don't say the type in JavaScript anymore. Okay. So that's way too big now. Well, I mean, the font size is supposed to be that size, but that's not even the font size, the button size. Oh well. We'll shrink that down to 10. And that doesn't matter. However you do it, it's okay. It's not that important. It's just make sure they work. Put a padding around it. No, I mean not padding. A margin. Let's just say 5px all around. And so it has some space between.
It's not way more than the bottom.
Oh yeah, thank you. So what was it?
Input.
Input, right?
Yeah, let's give you an idea.
Yeah, I put. I didn't put anything there. Let's give it something meaningful. Because it's not one. Yep. Thank you. Fine. We'll give it a class. btn. Okay, so input btn. So this would be the input of btn. Okay, so let's see if that works now. Okay, that'd be better. The size, because it's affected by the padding up here. This padding here applies to that as well because it's an import tag. That's why, but that's okay. The padding is too big. Okay, it's better. So notice that if you have this form, I mean, you don't know, the user doesn't know what to put in those two fields, right? So usually put either a label or a placeholder, right? Now, if you were to put label, you could put like label, and then for is for the first name. And then because the first name, it says it's invalid, it needs to reference an ID. So therefore, that's why I said it's kind of redundant. So we can actually change the name to ID instead of name. And then the label will be here, say, first name. So what that means, we have to break it off here. And we'll put a second label for the last name, right? And we'll also reference that last name ID here. I mean, it's not going to cause any major problem if you put a label for or not here. This is only for SEO purposes and for screen readers, or the for the ADA, the American Disability Association. So when you read this, it's already know that this label is for the first name. This label is for the last name. Okay, refresh it. You have two, and that now it looks ugly again. And then have to do more about it. CSS. So that needs to take care of by adding a margin. Just put 5px for the margin under the input. And since that's the case, I can take this out, right? Because it's redundant. Okay, its input applies to both of them. So here we have it. It's not nicely aligned, but that's okay. You can make it work if you want to, make it align and left adjustment and so on. So you can have it this way so they can read it, or you can put a placeholder directly into the tag. And so if you do that, then you don't need to supply the text over here. Okay, either way. So you can do both. For the input, you can say here, the placeholder is equal to, you could say first name. The input for the last name, same thing. Placeholder is last name. Or you can add a little more text and say enter your first name, enter your last name in here. Okay. You can even say, if you have a limit of characters, you can put after that, say 205 characters max, okay, or something like that, so they know. Okay, so let's add a few more. Maybe just one more here. You can just duplicate this line. Put that here. This two line, select that and then duplicate, Control D. And it's going to be for the email. So we'll put email here. And then again, say whatever, something like that, right? So they know that that's the expected pattern, and I should put a BR here as well. So it breaks into a separate line. Okay, so there. Again, it's not as nicely if you want to make it nice, you would wrap those into a div tag and then, you know, style those differently so they are aligned evenly across the site there. But for now, it's okay. So do something, we start over. Okay, so it looks fine. Okay, the buttons, if you want to make it nicer, just do one more thing with this button here. I want to say the width of, let's just put like 25 pixels, so they're both the same size. Oh, come on. Oh, that's too tiny. 125, how's that? Okay. Expect to be that big. Okay, so I think that's good enough for this form. So with that said, I can go back and then if you press the F12 key just to test those elements again, you can go document .forms. Now we have one. You can see that one form. It has no name. It's just a form. But if you click on the arrow, you see that it has a length of one, just one form. Click on the form, you see all these elements. Okay. So we have the first element, 2, 3, 4, 5. So there are 4 of them. And then now you could do like documents.forms of 0 .elements. So you can see that it has that many elements. 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. Okay, 5 elements. If you want to grab a particular one, you could just say elements of the first one will be the 0th position. That's going to grab the first name, right? And the second will be the second, third, fourth, and fifth, and so on. Since they have ID, name, first name, you could say the elements, instead of 0, you could put like in here first name, like the array, and that also grabs that first name. Notice that it's an ID. I can access it. Okay, even if it's a name, it should still work. So for example, if I go back to the email here, for example, I'm going to change that to, I'm not going to add a name. I'm going to say my email. So it's different from the ID. Okay, we just put that in there. So save that. Go back and refresh this. Okay. So if I type in again, document .forms of 0 .elements, and I'm going to select the email. So this is the ID, right? It returns the email tag. If I select the name instead, the name is my email. You can see that it also returns the same element. So in the form, it doesn't matter which one you use. So that's why it's preferred to use the ID. The reason is because when you have a label, the label only uses ID, right? So it's going to be redundant to have both name and ID of the same thing here. So really, you don't need this anymore. Okay, you don't have to. So the form also can have a name or an ID. It works the same way. I could put ID or name, doesn't matter. So I could put ID here. You can say I'm of membership or members. So I have a member with the ID. If I refresh this again, and I can do something like, instead of 0, I could put the name in here, member. So if I have a search form, a membership form, I have a comment form or whatever it is, I put that name in there, so I don't have to worry about which order is it in. Is it the 0th index, the 2nd index, or what, right? So you mention the name, it will grab you that particular form. So that is the ID or the name. Okay. So notice that from here, if you process this form with nothing in it, it will process it, right? It will just go ahead and process it for me. It refreshed the entire screen. As you can see, all these things are gone. I mean, it did process it. Okay. Maybe one thing I think maybe you might have to use the name for one reason. Well, I mean, to access it from the DOM or from the JavaScript, that's fine. You don't need it, but I think to process it, maybe you still do need a name for the inputs. And the reason is because, yeah, right. So when you process it in the back end, you still need to get the name field. Unless PHP or Java, they change that. But I think for now, yeah, maybe those names are still required. Okay. So I forgot about that. But in terms of the DOM, you don't have to reference that. So that's why we have to put a name, fortunately. Okay, so let's put it back. RAR. First name. Email. Just put it back to email. Okay. So if I save it now, I submit. Okay, now it works. It's all there, so that's good. All right, so it submits it without any errors. There's no validation. So from here, I mean, we use this to test, because you can, once your testing works, you can go back and then apply to your script, right? So from here, because notice I did not put the validation in these elements here, right? So usually if you go into the input tag for the first name, and at the end over here, or it doesn't matter where, it doesn't matter the order, you could put the required here just by itself. You can say required equal required. There's a lot of typing, but just required is enough. So now that field is now required. Okay, it's validated by the HTML, by the DOM or the browser, the BOM, and it's not part of JavaScript. Okay, it's built into the engine of the browser. So now if I refresh my site, and if I will process now, it's going to give me that error message or the feedback saying I need to fill that out, right? It didn't give a meaningful name, but you could overwrite that as well. But now just say it won't let me submit until I put something in that field. Okay. So I could put something there, and then the rest is good, right? It would still go. And because I have that in here, every time you submit this, it's going to require it. So to turn that off, if you need to, then instead of going to every field, let's just say put that in here, put that in here, and here. Not the last name should be required. How do you get the last name there? Okay, so if you require all of them, so if you want to turn those off, you have to go to every tab, every control, and turn those off, remove them, right? Or you can say, you can go up to the form tag here, and doesn't matter where, anywhere in here, you just put no validate, and that will override all the elements in there. It will turn all those required off, so you don't have to validate those, okay? Just by putting that there. And if you save that now and submit it, as you can see, it goes. Okay, no problem. And if you want to check to see if that attribute is set or not there, or set, you can say, because it's a property, remember a property, you can access any property with a dot notation, right? So it's a property of the form. So I can say something like the form is the form of ID. I could do since I'll be using that for a while, I'm going to do this. I'm going to say var f for the form is equal to document dot forms. The first one is 0. I will have 1. Or you can say the member, right? It's fine. So now f is that form. Okay? So to check that no validate, you can say form f dot no validate, and it will return true or false. So you see that returns true, right? True means no validate is equal to true, so therefore it's do not validate. That's what it means. It's the reverse of the word no validate, right? And that's the default. So if you want to turn that off, so again, when you submit it, it goes, right? It submits it. If you want to turn that off to make it required again, so that the fields will be required, you can just set that to true, to false. So you can do like f that no validate equals false. Okay, so now when I submit this form, it's going to ask me to input that name, right? Put that there. If I add these, all three are required, so they're back to that. So notice I did not, the email, it didn't conform, it was not conform to that pattern. I just required, it just means it cannot be blank, right? That's what require means. It cannot be empty. Yes?
Is there a way to validate the whole form without having to go through each input?
The whole form? No. You have to validate each one of them. Yeah.
Just before you really want it. Yeah.
You have to check every one of them. Or you can use a loop through the form of thing that element count or length, and then you check every one of them. So okay, so let's see. So we got that. Okay, so the email, we could change the input here. I just say here, if you don't specify the type, then it's defaulted to type of text, right? So if you want this to be email to match this pattern, then you can set the type to email. And this again part of the browser. So now it will be has to be in this format. Otherwise, it's not only required, but it's need to be in that particular format. Okay, so if I save this again, it should be, put that name here, last name, and if I put just F here, if I put join,
So you have no validator.
oh, I did? Oh, yeah, thanks. RAR. So let's turn that off. Terrible today, what's going on? Okay, so let's try again. Okay, good. First name, last name, and email. Right? So it would say it has to be in that. I'm missing @ symbol. I put an @ symbol there. It would say I'm missing something else, right? Incomplete, and then H. Oh, it goes. Weird. it shouldn't have gone, but it went. So it's not as good as you would expect, right? But okay, so now it's validated, and notice I don't have that thing in the validation here. I can still check that. So F is gone because I refresh it. It's gone. Just go back up here. I'm going to cheat it for a little bit. Okay. If I set F, the no validate, it's now false. I can set that to true. And then now is no longer required to validate, right? So the action also, I can change that. Right now it's going to the pound. If I want the form to go to a different page, I can just say f.action, go to Google, or the whole name, right? Oh, I lost that session already. So you got that one there. And then f.action, equals. Okay, so now the form goes there. If I put something here, it takes me to Google. Okay, so you can overwrite all of that properties in the code. So that means even though I have it as a pound sign, I can overwrite it within the code. But what I did was just basically you're just testing on the developer tools, right? Just for a quick and dirty way of validating your form. But you want to put that into practice, put it into the code itself to make sure it works. So you have to write that in the program. So let's switch over to the script and validate our form. Before we do that, notice that the form here has something, another attribute here called the onSubmit. Okay, when you submit this form, if you want to validate with your own script, then you should add this submit attribute, and then we're going to say return either true or false. Basically, if it's true, then it will submit the form if everything meets your validation criteria. Otherwise, if you put false, then it doesn't matter if it meets or not. No matter what, the form will never be submitted. Okay, that's all it is. So this false statements here part, you want to use a function to return either true or false. Okay, so return true or false. So now we're going to save this and go into our script. So I have to write a function called validate form. So again, notice that our script is at the top, right? So if you want to target this form, you want to make sure the form has been loaded already. So you want to put that into the window unload. We use the anonymous function here for now, or that function will name. And we're just going to want to validate that form. You can make it global if you want. You can say like var form here and then just leave it blank. And then in here, I would say form is equal to document that you can do it like get element by ID, since you have an ID for the form as a member. Right? There are lots of ways. You can get the ID instead if you have a class in here, or if you can get the form by tag name, and so on, right? So since it's a form, then you basically just want to get the forms. And the form has a name. It's called member. Okay? So that will target that form right away. Or if you want to put 0 in there, that's fine too. So now that's been set. So my function, all I'm doing here is that, so now this form here, once I load the form, then it's going to call this function and then sets my form to that member form, and then after this I could come out of here to a function and I can access that form. It's a global variable, right? So I could do like function validate form. I mean, you don't have to put it here if you want. This whole part is just optional. I just put it here because maybe I'm thinking maybe later on I might want to access down here. If you don't do that, you can put this whole thing inside the validate form and you're good to go too. Okay, that's completely fine. So validate form. So the first thing we want to validate is, let's just go back and turn this off, okay? Because you don't want to double validation here. This makes no sense. So you want to validate the first name. How do you do that? Make sure it's not empty. It has something in the first name field. So how do I go from here? what's the first thing we should do here? How do you grab the first name? By ID? Sure. Yeah, you can get yeah, you can get ID. It's fine, right? If you look at this, it has an ID. It has an ID, has a name. It has it's a tag input. It's the first input in this example, but I mean, you probably don't want to do that. You can say input with a name, because you could have another form has an input called name as well, right? What I mean is that you can have another form here, down here. It could be like member. This could be like VIP member, for example, and have the same first name, last name, and so on. So this one here is like, again, it's just saying that there's an error here because of that. Okay, so you can have a name in multiple places. So it's still fine because it's in the form. So usually in the form you can say just go form dot first name, right? Notice I use the dot notation. It's object, right? They're all object. They're properties of the form. I mean, part of the form control, so I can access them to the dot notation, and this can be either the name or the ID. Okay, it doesn't matter which one. I happen to use the same one for both of them, both the name and ID, so I can access it that way. So it'll be just form member dot first name, we'll grab this field, form dot last name, grab that field, and so on. Okay, so I can say now if this form first name is equal to blank, right? If that's the case, then it's empty, right? So usually you can say if that's the case, then it's empty. Therefore, I can say return. I mean, you don't just want to return false. You want to return an error message to that user. So you can do something like just for this one, right? You can say form. How do we do this? If you put an error message, you would have to put like right below here or next to it. Over here it says require something. So that means you have to go over here to the input tag and put a something over here like a span tag, right? So after the first name, span, you can put the ID of, how do you call this? Error first name. Okay, something like that, so you can put the message there. Because right now it's blank. So I can say error first name, error, copy that, and put into the other ones too, the last name, and then the input name. Again, this is just one way, there are lots of ways. I'm sure there's lots of more efficient way. Okay. If you refresh it, it should not have any issues. So if that is true, then I'm going to set the form dot error. Oh, I didn't put the name in there. If I did put the name, what I would just put in there? Let's see. Well, you do like document dot get element by ID. Error first name. And usually, if you do this, you want to pass this to a function instead of doing that right here. Okay. Enter HTML. Say can't be blank or something. Right. And you could put like a variable here for like error count 0, and then you could increase the error count by 1. And you can do the same thing here, right? Copy that and check the last name. If last name is also blank, you can say error for last name. Can be blank also, and the error count is that. Same thing with the email. And of course, I could you could validate so that it meets the criteria that we have, like I have in the notes. Error email. And then finally, at the very bottom, because remember, it needs to come back in the form of true or false. Okay, false means do not process. True means go ahead and process the form. So here you could say if error count greater than 0, then return false, right? Else return true. Okay. So if any of these has errors, then it will not process the form. Otherwise, no errors. It should be 0, so therefore it processes the form. Again, this is just one way. Okay, not not the only way. And also, this is not the most efficient way either. There are different ways as well. You can do it this way at the end of the form, or if you want to validate as you type along, like as soon as you type, you can say unchange. You can directly apply to the input tag unchange or something, then call a function to validate that form directly. Okay, so as they type, it changes right away. Sometimes that could be annoying, depending how you design the form. But because if you put that here, that means that the user cannot move on to the next field until they complete that field. So they kind of put that limit right there. Okay, so we go back here and refresh. We'll see if that does anything at all. So click submit. Didn't work. So what happened there? Okay, let's see what's going on. Validate form. I have a submit return validate form. I'm wondering.
Don't your parentheses need to be inside the end of your validate form?
What do you mean here?
No, over here. Doesn't the parentheses, the quotation marks, need to be inside? Yeah.
No, no. Yeah, it needs to be outside. It needs to wrap it inside here. Okay, so the validate form here.
Don't have a statement block in front of your statement at the bottom.
Oh, I think here I need to check the value. I think that's what it is. Because now just that email just pointing to that tag. So I think I have to check the value. See if that's correct. So let's save that and try it again. Okay, so there we have it. But when I clear it, right, when I clear it, this didn't go away. So when you click the clear button, you have to do another function to wipe out this whole text here. but so notice if you do it this way, that's fine, right? Because it's gonna check all of them. And sometimes this is not as efficient because if it's already validated, then if it has a name or has something in the text field, you don't need to validate that, right? So, or maybe like, do you need to check all of them or not, right? If you do, then that's fine. If you don't, then you don't have to put in separate if blocks. If you use the if and else part, then they only check one at a time. So in this example here, I'm checking all three of them, or all of them in this case. If you want to break it so that when you have the first occurrence, if, let's just say the first one is fine, second is fail, then I want to stop here. I don't need to check the rest, then you can pause here. Okay, if you do that, then you can put a return here. If you return here, if I put return false, then I end the execution here, so the rest will be stopped. I don't check the other ones here. So this way, it's kind of like you checking one at a time. Okay. If you don't do, you return the bottom, then you're gonna check everything here. You force you to check everything, and then you will just submit one time at the end here. So either way, how you do it, that's completely up to you. Let's see. So if we do the other way, like I mentioned, then one thing I want to show you is that you can actually set the focus to that location. Let's just say return false. If you find an error, we stop there. If you do it this way, okay. And down here, really, you don't really care about the count anymore, right? I could just return. If none of these is false, then it has to be true. So I could do that. And it's kind of nice this way because if you do this way, I can set the focus. If the errors occur here, then I'm going to say form dot first name dot focus. Not unfocus, just focus. And I think if that's the case, if I submit this form has an error, it'll put my cursor right into that field. Okay, so again, if I copy this, put it down here to each of these fields, and just change that field here. So now if I save this, and if I put the first name here, and the last name is blank, I put the email here, I submit, let's give my last name. Not sure why.
It's not because you didn't put it in email format.
Oh, that's it? Oh, yeah. Okay, fine. So there. Okay, so what we have the email format, right? Okay, so this is another way how you can, check every form, just every field, just to make sure they are validated, without, submitting at the end. You have a bunch of, red marks all over the place. You might kind of scare the user too. So that's another method here. You usually want to put all these into a field, a variable name, right? Because this is a lot of typing. So on the top of your form here, you want to say things like first name, last name, email, into variable name. And so when you get here, you just put that, first name, last name, and so on. But more efficiently, you can actually put it to a function to process these. So all these here can be put into a function. Because the only difference you see here are the error message, the ID here, and the field. Everything is the same. So you put that into a function, and you pass this parameter to the function, so you replace this with that those parameters. So instead of having 8 lines of code here, 12 lines of code, I could just make that into a single format. So let's say if first name, that value is blank, then you know, show message, show error or something, right? And you pass those parameters to that function, it will process it. Okay. The other one is validity. So for example here, instead of doing this way, you could do like if form that first name, that value, put that thing here, say value dot is val no check, what's that function called? Can't remember. Not valid. I don't remember that function name. Don't use it. But it's in my notes somewhere over here.
Is it check validity?
Yeah, check validity. And I want, yeah, this function here. I'm surprised it's not in that IDE. But you can check it so that you don't have to say it's equal to string or not. Like I have it down here somewhere. You can use that to help you as well. Okay. Yeah, this one here. Check the validity and see if that works. So maybe because I put that value here, maybe no value. No. And use that instead of the blank here, and that should also work. Okay. Okay, I think I didn't cover everything I wanted to, but if you do the exercise in the book, I think the book has a pretty good examples of how it goes through the process of validating using the DOM functions, the validity, and I think there's a few more that if you look at it, it has like a different browser has different you call those like those error messages. It will show up right below that message right there. Like if you put the email here incorrectly, right? We know that if you do something like this, Google has that yellow box. If you run a Firefox, you'll see it differently. It's a different browser, so they have their own ways of having the little bubble there. Okay, so okay. If there's any questions, just shoot me email. Yes.
So why would you script all this if you can just do it with HTML5?
Yeah, good question.
Full compatibility.
I'm not trying to be a smart aleck.
No, yeah, you can. So right, so because with HTML5, right, you don't have to do that anymore.
Okay.
But
So would you just skip all this and let HTML5 do it?
yes, if you can with HTML5, just use HTML5.
Okay.
Some you can't. Like for example, the email address, it didn't validate because I didn't put the .com. It will go away anyway. So that part you have to validate manually.
Okay.
Okay. But some cases you do, some you don't.
Okay. But for like just name and.
Yeah, those you don't have to. You would do that because maybe some old browsers are not able to validate. You still have to check. I'm sure there's some people out there still run, IE6. So in that case, I don't know, they just refuse to move forward. So only for that purpose. But if you have, most people today don't use that anymore.
Okay.
Yeah.
So it's just for basically for all browser support?
Yeah, all browser support, and for any browser that does not support HTML5. I'm not sure about like screen readers and so on. I'm not sure if they can support HTML5 or not either. So sometimes screen readers. I'm not sure. Maybe I think most of them they are. Like mobile devices, I think all have HTML5 in it. So, yeah.
Thank you, sir.
All right. So please do think about if you want to talk. Yes.
I'll talk.
You talk?
Yeah.
Okay. How about you?
Talk about my
About-
experience here?
Yeah, your experience about in the IT program
Okay.
and so on.
Okay.
Cool. So I have two. All right. Cool.
Do we have just same time and everything?
Yeah, if you want to be, it will be the same thing right after class. I'm sure if you have time after class on that.
Okay. Yeah.
If you don't, we can schedule a different time for them to come
Okay.
in.
I have time.
Okay, awesome. Thank you, guys.
Yeah.
All right.
Have a good evening.
You too.